The cold here isn't like the stories. It doesn't just bite, it hunts. It crawls under your skin and settles in your bones like a parasite you can't dig out. I've been sitting on this block of ice for hours, and I can't feel my feet anymore. 3 days ago, I could still wiggle my toes. 2 days ago, I felt the pins and needles. Yesterday, nothing. Today, I'm not sure they're even still attached to my legs. I have a hole in front of me, a black pit that stares back like the eye of something dead. It hasn't given me a single bone in 3 days, not a fin, not even a frozen minnow, just darkness and the sound of water moving beneath the ice, taunting me. And my mother is waiting, lying in bed in our dilapidated cabin, wrapped in every blanket we own, and still shivering. Her lungs can no longer endure this cold. Each breath sounds like wind through a cracked window, wet, rattling, wrong. This morning, before I left, she grabbed my wrist with fingers so thin I could feel every bone. "Leo," she whispered, her voice like dried leaves. "Don't come back empty-handed, please." She didn't mean it as encouragement. She meant, if you fail today, don't bother coming back to watch me die. If I don't bring her something to eat today, she won't make it past tonight. I know this the way you know when a storm is coming, deep in your gut, undeniable. Hunger won't let me think straight. My head feels light, disconnected from my body. I've scraped the bottom of every grain sack in the house, and only dust remains. Dust and the smell of mold. I even licked the inside of the flour bag this morning, getting grit and nothing else on my tongue. I'm out here because I don't know what else to do. The village won't help. They're barely surviving themselves. I asked Ivan 3 days ago if I could work for scraps. He laughed in my face and told me he doesn't hire corpses in waiting. I'd rather the ice kill me than sit in that cabin watching her fade away, listening to those horrible breaths getting further and further apart. Nothing here seems alive. Nothing moves. The wind has stopped. The sky is the color of old bone. Even the crows have abandoned this part of the lake. I'm so desperate, I grabbed the axe and struck the edge of the hole to see if I could wake something up. The sound echoed across the frozen wasteland, a sharp, violent crack that made my ears ring. But instead of a fish, I woke something else. The water began to move, not ripples, a purposeful current, like something massive circling below. A dark shape passed beneath my feet, blocking out what little light penetrated the ice, something heavy that made the ground where I stood vibrate, sending hairline cracks spiderwebbing out from the hole. I should have run. Every instinct I had left was screaming at me to run. But I stayed, because I'm already dead if I leave empty-handed. The ice burst with a sharp crack that sounded like a gunshot. I threw myself back as the water splashed my face and burned my skin like acid. Steam rose where it touched me. Out of that pit came a creature that could not exist. She moved wrong, too fluid, too deliberate. Her hands, if you could call them that, gripped the frozen edge with clawed fingers that dug into solid ice like it was warm butter. She pulled herself up slowly, taking her time, knowing I wouldn't run, knowing I couldn't. She is not an animal. No, she's a woman, or was once. Her skin is blue like deep water, covered in scales that catch the weak light and throw it back in fractured rainbows. Her face is beautiful and terrible at once. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, eyes that are completely black, no whites, no iris, just endless dark that seemed to swallow the world. She looked at me as if she were my prey, but also as if she'd been waiting for me specifically, as if she knew I would come. She stayed perfectly still with those fixed eyes that seemed to see into my soul, past my fear, past my desperation, straight down to the rotting core of what I was willing to do to survive. I couldn't take my eyes off her. It wasn't attraction, it was the same paralysis a rabbit feels when the wolf's teeth are already at its throat. Then she smiled, It was not a human smile. She reached out a hand, moving it through the air like she was swimming, and showed me a golden fish that gave off a strong light. A light that didn't just glow, it pulsed like a heartbeat. It made you warm just by looking at it, made you remember what summer felt like, what hope tasted like. That fish was my mother's life. I knew it instantly. That light could burn away her fever, fill her empty stomach, pull her back from the edge. Fear retreated to a corner of my mind, and I managed to stammer, my voice cracking. Please, please give me the fish. I need to take something home. I didn't expect her to speak. I only hoped she would throw it to me so I could run away from there, back to the cabin, back to my mother. But she spoke. I need something too. Her voice was like wind through ice caves, hollow, ancient, patient. She wasn't going to give me the fish for free. She knew I wasn't stupid enough to thrust my hand into the water to take it. She wasn't going to allow my parent to live unless I paid the price. She knew I was already dead if she didn't release me. She pointed at my chest and then at my clothes with one long clawed finger. I understood what she wanted. My hands shook as I reached for the collar of my wool tunic. This was the only thing keeping me from freezing solid on the walk back. Without it, I might not make it home alive. But what choice did I have? I pulled the tunic over my head and stood bare-chested against the wind that battered my skin. The cold hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs. My chest seized up, my nipples burned. She watched me with those unblinking eyes, tilted her head slightly, then emerged fully from the hole. Water streamed off her body, freezing instantly into tiny crystals that clinked as they hit the ice. She moved toward me on all fours, like some terrible predator, scales scraping against the frozen surface. When she was close enough that I could feel the cold radiating off her, a cold that made the winter air seem warm by comparison, she reached out her blue hands and placed them directly on my bare flesh, right over my heart. It wasn't a touch, it was an invasion. She dug her claws in, just enough so I couldn't move, puncturing my skin in 5 perfect points. I felt warm blood trickle down my stomach, freezing before it reached my belt. Then the real cold came. It was like falling through lake ice into black water, like every nightmare of drowning and freezing happening at once. I felt an axe blow of cold that emptied my lungs and left me breathless, unable even to scream. She was stealing my life to warm herself. I could feel it draining out of me through those 5 points of contact, my heat, my humanity, everything that made me alive, flowing into her like water into a cracked basin. It hurt so much that I was on the verge of fainting. My vision tunneled, black spots danced at the edges, my legs buckled. But I didn't let go of consciousness. I didn't fall. I accepted the pain because the glow of that fish, still resting on the ice beside us, is the only thing that will keep us all from ending up underground today. I watched her face as she fed. Her blue skin began to flush with color, just slightly, just enough to see. Her black eyes gained a spark of something almost like life. She let out a sound that might have been pleasure, or relief, or hunger finally being satisfied after too long. When she finally withdrew her claws, I fell to my knees on the snow like a puppet with cut strings. The wounds in my chest sealed themselves instantly, freezing shut, leaving 5 perfect scars in a circle around my heart. The cold was no longer attacking me from the outside. Now I had it inside me, settled in my chest like a stone, like a seed that had been planted. She stepped back, looked at me with something that might have been gratitude or might have been amusement, and gestured to the golden fish. I grabbed it from the ground with numb fingers. Its skin burned so much it nearly scorched my already frozen hands. It was hot and alive, thrashing weakly, its scales almost too bright to look at directly. I put on my tunic in a hurry with clumsy hands that wouldn't respond properly. My fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. and I started running towards the shore without looking back. The fish clutched against my chest, its heat the only thing keeping my heart pumping. I only thought about reaching the cabin before my own body gave out, before whatever she'd planted in my chest took root completely. I burst through the cabin door and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it, gasping for air that burned going down. My mother was still in the same place, wrapped in blankets, breathing with that broken whistling that set my nerves on edge. But the whistling was slower now, weaker. She was running out of time. "Leo?" Her voice was a bare whisper. "Did you—" I went straight to the fireplace, not answering. The embers were almost dead. We'd run out of wood yesterday. I threw in the last chair we owned, breaking it against the stones, and waited for the flames to catch. I didn't clean the fish. There was no time. I threw it into the hot pan just as it was, scales and all. The grease splattered immediately, and the smell of roasted meat filled the room in seconds. Not fish smell, something richer, sweeter, like nothing I'd ever cooked before. My stomach clenched so hard I doubled over. When was the last time I'd eaten? 2 days? 3? But this wasn't for me. My stomach ached from hunger, cramping, acid churning on empty. But I grabbed the pan, burning my palms through the thin cloth, and went toward the cot. I shook her by the shoulder, perhaps too roughly. Mother, wake up, you need to eat." She opened her eyes, milky, unfocused, already looking at the other side. I put the first piece into her mouth with my own fingers, because she didn't have the strength even to lift her head. The meat was so hot it must have burned her tongue, but she didn't react. She swallowed without chewing, her throat working mechanically. At the second bite, color returned to her face like sunrise spreading across snow. Pink bloomed in her gray cheeks. Her eyes cleared, focused, found mine. By the third bite, she sat up in the cot with a strength she hadn't had in weeks and snatched the pan from my hands to eat the rest, her movements almost violent with sudden hunger. I stood there watching her devour it, frightened by the speed at which the illness was vanishing. It wasn't natural. Sickness doesn't leave like that. It fades slowly, grudgingly. This was something else. She ate everything. The bones, the scales. She licked the pan clean, her tongue chasing every drop of grease, then looked at me with wild eyes. "More," she said. "Is there more?" "No, Mother, that was—" "Find more." She grabbed my arm with shocking strength. "Leo, you have to find more. I feel alive again. I can't go back to how it was. Please." Then, as suddenly as the strength had come, it left. She fell back exhausted, her eyes rolling up, and she slept as she hadn't in years, deep, profound, absolute. I sat before the fire to try to get warm. I put my hands almost inside the flames, so close the hairs on my knuckles singed and curled. I saw the wood burning and my skin reddening from the proximity, but I felt nothing. The heat wouldn't enter me. It was like trying to warm a stone. The surface got hot, but the core stayed frozen. I rubbed my arms violently, trying to generate friction, trying to remember what warm felt like. Nothing. I looked down at my chest, at the 5 new scars arranged in a perfect circle. They looked old, like I'd had them for years, like they'd always been there. I sat there through the night watching her sleep peacefully, while I shivered despite the fire. At dawn, she got up and seemed completely cured. She moved through the house as if she had never been sick, humming an old song, touching things she hadn't had the strength to lift in months. "Leo, my boy," she pulled me into a hug. "You saved me, my good son, my clever boy." I wanted to feel relief. I wanted to celebrate. But something was wrong. I could feel it. At noon, while she was sweeping, something she couldn't have done yesterday, she let out the first cough. Just one, small, almost apologetic. But I heard it, and I knew. She doubled over the broom, and when I went to hold her, I felt the fever radiating off her like she was a stove. It had returned, and this time it was worse. She looked at me with pure panic in her eyes, the same panic a drowning person has when they realize the shore is too far. "Leo," she gasped, "it's back. How is it back already? The fish, it worked. I felt it working." "I know, Mother, I know. Get more, please. Whatever you did, do it again. I can't go back to how I was. I'd rather die quick than slow like that again." The medicine was gone. Less than a day. It had bought her hours, not days. I didn't have to think about it. I grabbed the walking stick and headed back out toward the ice, knowing with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning, that whatever bargain I'd made, the price was going to keep rising. I reached the same hole. The water had frozen over again during the night, a perfect sheet of black ice like a mirror reflecting nothing. I used the stick to break the layer, striking hard until the black water peeked through once more. Chips of ice scattered across the surface, tinkling like broken glass. I didn't have to wait. I'd barely pulled the stick back when the surface broke from below, and she came out, resting her elbows on the edge as if she'd been waiting just beneath, listening for my footsteps. She looked different, less blue, more alive. There was color in her lips now, warmth in her skin that hadn't been there before. My warmth, my life. She was feeding on me, I realized, growing stronger while I grew colder. She didn't have the fish in her hand this time. I shouted to her that I needed another, that the fever had returned already, that my mother was dying again. She looked at me without moving a muscle in her face, totally still, like a snake deciding whether to strike. "Heat is no longer of use to me," she said. Her voice sounded deeper than before, more solid, more real. "You already gave me that. If you want another, give me your first memory." "My what?" "Your first memory, the earliest thing you can recall, the foundation of who you are." She reached out her open hand toward my face, palm up, waiting. "Give it to me, and the fish is yours." I should have asked why. I should have demanded to know what she wanted with my memories, what she was building herself into with these pieces of me. But my mother was dying. Again, already. I didn't think twice. I closed my eyes and searched for the image I knew was my earliest. My mother singing to me in the kitchen when I was a child. I must have been 3, maybe 4. The kitchen was warm. There was bread baking. She was young, her voice strong and clear, singing a song about summer and birds. As soon as I had it clear in my head, sharp and vivid, I felt a sharp tug at the base of my skull, a sudden, acute pain like a fishhook being yanked through my brain. I gasped. My eyes flew open. When I opened them fully, she had already sunk back into the dark water, leaving only ripples. The fish was flapping on the ice at my feet, identical to the first one, golden, glowing, alive. I grabbed it quickly, its heat shocking against my frozen hands. Then I tried to find that image in my head, the kitchen, the bread, the song. I knew I had just been thinking about it. I could remember remembering it, but the image itself? Nothing. A blank void where something precious used to be. Like a missing tooth you keep touching with your tongue. I knew I had had that memory just a second ago. I knew my mother used to sing, but I couldn't recall the tune, couldn't picture her face young, couldn't feel the warmth of that kitchen. It was gone, taken, a piece of me carved out cleanly, leaving just a scar-shaped hole. I tucked the fish under my clothes, feeling it burn against the frozen skin of my chest, and started my way back, trying not to think about what I'd just lost, trying not to wonder what I'd lose next. I arrived at the cabin with my heart racing, my breath coming in short gasps that hurt my frozen lungs. My mother was lying on the floor near the extinguished fire, curled in on herself, shaking violently. I cooked the fish quickly, without saying a word, my hands moving on autopilot. The smell filled the cabin again, that impossible, wonderful smell that made hunger feel like a knife in my gut. I fed it to her piece by piece. She ate with her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered between bites. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She swallowed the last piece and immediately jumped up, that same unnatural vitality flooding through her. The fever left her instantly, but now she had a strange energy, manic, unfocused. She began to pace back and forth across the room, eyes fixed on nothing, pupils dilated. She looked at me, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Not gratitude, not love, hunger. "Leo," she said, her voice too bright, too eager. "I'm still hungry. I want more of that. Where did you get it? Can you get more?" "Mother, you just ate." "I know what I ate. I want more." She grabbed my shoulders, her grip painfully tight. "That fish makes everything better. It makes everything go away. The cold, the pain, the fear. I need it. Don't you understand? I need it." She didn't thank me for risking my life. She only demanded that I return to the lake for another. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were too bright, her movements too quick. She was vibrating with an energy that seemed barely contained by her skin. This wasn't health. This was something else wearing health's mask. "I'll go tomorrow," I said quietly. "Why not now? Why wait? Go now, Leo, please, for your mother." "It's almost dark. The ice." "Then go at first light. Promise me. Promise you'll go at first light." "I promise." She finally released me, seemingly satisfied, and threw herself onto the cot. Within seconds, she was asleep, but even in sleep, she twitched and muttered, her body unable to fully rest. I sat against the wall, watching her, and realized with cold certainty what was happening. She wasn't getting better. She was getting addicted, and I was her dealer. I returned every day after that, sometimes twice a day. The medicine was consumed faster and faster in my mother's body. The first fish lasted almost a day, the second half that. By the fifth, she was crashing within hours, and the creature's prices kept rising. One day, she asked me to steal firewood from the Petrov family next door. They had a sick child too, a little girl with the same wet cough my mother used to have. I did it that same night, moving like a shadow through their yard. I left an entire family without fire to feed my own. The next morning, I heard the little girl crying from the cold. I didn't look at their cabin when I walked past. Another day, the creature demanded I steal from Ivan's warehouses in the village. I stood at the edge of the ice and told her no. I shouted at her, explained that Ivan has his dogs guarding those warehouses 24 hours a day, that if I went near them, they would hang me, and my mother would be left alone to die slowly. She stopped floating peacefully. Her entire demeanor changed in an instant. She grabbed the edge of the hole with violence, her claws digging deep into the ice, not resting on it, but piercing through it. She rose until her face was inches from mine, water streaming from her hair, her black eyes boring into me. The water at my feet began to bubble, not from heat, from something moving beneath, circling, waiting. "Are you afraid of a man?" She spat the words, her voice no longer soft or patient, but a deep rasp that seemed to come from somewhere inside the earth. "Look at me, Leo." She couldn't look away if she wanted to. "I am the one who decides if your mother sees tomorrow. Ivan can only break your bones. He can only make you bleed. I can leave you completely alone in this world. I can take her from you in ways that will make you beg for the mercy of simple death." She grabbed me by the ankle with shocking speed, her quad hand wrapping completely around it. She squeezed just enough to let me know that she could drag me into the black water if she wanted, that she could pull me down into depths where light never reaches and hold me there until my lungs burst. "You will go to the village," she ordered, her voice absolutely certain. "And you won't steal trash. You're going to take something he values, something that hurts him to lose, something that makes him feel what you feel." She leaned closer, so close I could see my terrified reflection in her black eyes. "If you come back empty-handed," she whispered, "don't come back at all." She let go of my ankle and vanished into the pit in one fluid motion, leaving me shaking on the ice. I didn't have to think about it. My mother needed the medicine. The creature had made the terms clear. I ran toward the village, but I didn't take the main road where people might see me. I went behind the houses, crawling through the dirty snow where no one looks, where people dump their waste and forget about it. My body moved differently now. I didn't feel the cold anymore, didn't feel my muscles burning from the exertion. I was changing, becoming something between human and whatever she was. I reached Ivan's stone warehouse, the biggest building in the village, where he hoarded food while everyone else starved. The two guards were huddled around a fire barrel at the entrance, distracted, rubbing their hands together to keep from losing their fingers to frostbite. Their breath came out in great white clouds. I passed through the dark side in total silence. My feet made no sound on the frozen ground. I no longer trembled from the cold or from fear. I was invisible, a ghost, a shadow, something that didn't quite exist in the normal world anymore. I found the ventilation vent I'd discovered years ago when I used to work for Ivan, back when he still hired people. It's too narrow for a normal man to fit through, but I wasn't normal anymore. I squeezed through, my body compressing in ways that should have been impossible, my frozen joints bending at angles that would have broken bones before. Inside, it smelled like real food, grain and cured meat and cheese, and things I'd almost forgotten existed. My stomach roared with sudden, violent hunger, my mouth flooded with saliva. I didn't go for the grain or the common supplies. I went straight to a locked shelf in the back corner, the one where I knew Ivan kept his personal luxuries. There was a bottle of amber liquor that probably cost more than my cabin, a package of cured venison wrapped in wax paper, real coffee beans in a sealed tin. These were treasures in a world that was starving. It was a haul worth more than my entire life. I tucked everything under my coat, feeling the weight of both the goods and my guilt, and turned to leave the way I'd come. But I froze on the spot. Ivan wasn't outside with the guards. He was inside, sitting on a pile of grain sacks in the darkness just 3 meters away from me, perfectly still, watching me with the patience of a hunter who's found his trap sprung. He had an iron club resting on his knees, and he watched me with no surprise at all, like someone who sees mice in his kitchen every day and has finally decided to deal with the problem. "I knew it was you, Leo," he said, and his voice echoed against the stone walls, bouncing back from all directions. "I've been losing supplies for weeks, small things at first, then bigger. I knew someone was getting in, and I knew it had to be someone small, someone desperate." He stood up slowly, deliberately, making the grain sacks crunch under his boots. The sound was loud in the enclosed space, a warning, a threat. "But you know what gave you away tonight?" I calculated the distance to the vent. Too far. He was bigger, stronger, and had the iron club. "You've smelled like rotten fish since the moment you stepped inside, like something that died in deep water and washed up on shore." He took a step toward me, the club swinging loosely in his hand. His fingers were thick and hot, and they squeezed my throat until I felt my own pulse pounding in my ears like a drum. He lifted me off the ground with one arm. I weighed nothing to him, and slammed me against the stone wall. The impact should have knocked me unconscious. The air escaped from my lungs in a rush, my vision blurred. But I didn't pass out. I didn't even feel that much pain, just impact, pressure, but no real hurt. He thrust his other hand into my clothes, searching violently like someone gutting an animal, his fingers rough and invasive. He found the bottle first, then the meat, then the coffee. He ripped them away and set them carefully on a sack out of my reach, almost tenderly. Then he turned back to me with pure rage in his eyes. He said nothing, no warnings, no questions. He clenched his fist and delivered a hook straight to my ribs, a blow that would have killed a normal man, that should have caved in my chest. I heard the crunch of bone breaking, a dry crack like stepping on a branch. My body jolted from the impact, my ribs folding inward. But I felt no pain. My breathing didn't even falter. I kept staring at him, my face completely expressionless, my eyes empty. Ivan stepped back, confused, rubbing his knuckles. He looked at his hand, then back at me, as if I'd somehow cheated. He didn't understand why I wasn't writhing on the floor, screaming, begging. He'd hit me hard enough to break bone. He'd heard it break, but I just stood there. He grabbed my clothes again to drag me toward the door, but as soon as his bare hand brushed against my neck, he let go violently, as if he'd touched a hot stove. He looked at the palm of his hand, and I saw his skin was red, almost burned, but not from heat, from cold, the kind of cold that burns just as badly. He looked at me with wide eyes, his expression changing from anger to something else, something worse. Fear. Recognition. He had touched what I was becoming, felt the absolute zero beneath my skin, the unhuman cold that had replaced my blood. He stepped back, holding his burned palm against his chest, and stared at me with pure disgust. "You're not human anymore. What are you? What did you do?" I didn't answer, couldn't answer, because I didn't know. He didn't touch me again. He couldn't. His survival instincts wouldn't let him get close to that cold again. Instead, he kicked the back door open, wood slamming against stone, and stepped aside to let me through. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking now, all the authority gone. "Get out of here, you corpse, you walking dead thing." He wasn't laughing anymore. He looked at me with pure revulsion, like I was something that should be buried. "If I see you again, I'll burn you. Do you hear me? I'll burn whatever's left of you." I left through the alley and didn't stop running until I reached the ice, my broken ribs clicking with every step, a sound I could hear but not feel. I threw myself to the ground in front of the hole, ready for her to drag me into the bottom for having failed her command. She came out slowly, emerging like something being born, water streaming off her scales. But she didn't look at my empty hands. She fixed her black eyes on my ribs, on the sunken, broken place where Ivan had struck me, and she smiled. It wasn't the cold smile from before. This was warm, almost genuine, satisfied. She didn't care about the meat or the liquor. She cared about seeing that I had lost, that I had been beaten, humiliated, rejected, that I had been hurt. "Hatred looks good on you," she told me, her voice almost affectionate. "It suits you better than hope ever did. It's more honest, more real." She produced a fish from the water, larger than the others, its glow almost blinding, and threw it on the ice without asking for anything else. "This one is free, because you've given me something better than heat or memory. You've given me your humanity. Piece by piece, you're becoming what you need to be." Before I could ask what she meant, she sank back beneath the surface. I grabbed the fish and ran to the cabin, clutching it against my chest. As I ran, I touched my side, feeling the broken bone moving under my skin with every step, an internal clicking, grinding, things no longer connected properly. It should have been agonizing. I should have been screaming, unable to move. But I felt nothing. It was like touching a stranger's body. I burst into the cabin and threw the fish on the fire without ceremony. My mother didn't ask why I came back with torn clothes. She didn't ask why my chest was sunken and bruised purple-black, why I moved stiffly, why there was dry blood on my collar. She only had eyes for the pan, watching it cook with predatory focus. She ate the fish with her hands, not waiting for it to cool, burning her fingers. The skin blistered, but she didn't seem to notice or care. She just kept eating, fat dripping down her chin, her eyes glazed with pleasure. And I stayed there, standing in the dark corner of the cabin, watching her and feeding my resentment toward Ivan, feeling the hatred grow and solidify inside me like ice forming on a lake, slow, inevitable, thick enough to walk on. She wiped the grease from her mouth with the back of her hand and fell asleep instantly, letting out a wet snore as if she had water in her chest. The heat from the fish made her sweat despite the cold cabin. In her sleep, she kicked and pushed away the old blanket covering her legs, too hot, too uncomfortable. I stepped closer to cover her again, to tuck her in like she used to do for me when I was small. But I froze before I could touch her. The pale skin of her calves had vanished, gone completely, as if it had never been there. In its place was a hard, shimmering crust that reached down to her feet, covering her completely. I reached out with a trembling hand and brushed it with my fingertip. It was cold, hard, sharp-edged. They were scales, scales of a dirty blue color, identical to those of the woman from the lake. I backed away until I hit the wall, my hand over my mouth, finally understanding the full horror of what I had done. I wasn't curing her. I was turning her, into the creature, into something that belonged in deep water, not in the world of sun and air and human warmth. Every fish I brought home wasn't medicine, it was transformation, a slow metamorphosis that would end with my mother no longer being my mother at all. I covered her with the blanket carefully, my hands shaking. She didn't wake up, but her breathing changed, slower, deeper, like she was hibernating, like she was already becoming something that didn't need to breathe air so frequently. I spent the night awake, sitting against the far wall, watching her legs beneath the cloth, waiting to see if the scales would spread further, praying they wouldn't, knowing they would. At dawn, when the weak light filtered through the gaps in our walls, I tried to wake her, to give her a little water. She didn't respond to my voice. I shook her shoulder, gently at first, then harder. Nothing. Her eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, unblinking. A thin layer of frost had formed over her eyelashes, making them sparkle like diamonds. She didn't speak, didn't ask for food or water. She only waited, staring at nothing, breathing so slowly I had to put my hand over her mouth to be sure she was still alive. Her skin was growing colder and colder with each passing hour, approaching the temperature of the ice outside. But she was still alive. Her heart still beat. I could feel it when I pressed my ear to her chest. Slow, deep, like something in the ocean depths, something designed for pressure and cold and darkness. I realized with absolute horror that the fish wasn't just taking away her hunger, it was taking away her humanity as well. She was becoming something that could survive forever in the cold, but at the cost of everything that made her human. Her warmth, her voice, her love, her soul. I left the cabin in a rage that burned colder than any fire. I grabbed the walking stick and went down to the lake, moving faster than I ever had before, my broken ribs grinding with each step and making a sound like gravel in a jar. I didn't care. I was going to get answers. I was going to make her fix this, or I was going to destroy that hole with my bare hands and freeze to death trying. I reached the hole and struck the ice with the stick, over and over, with such force that the wood creaked and splintered, threatening to shatter. "Come out!" I screamed, my voice echoing across the frozen wasteland. "Come out and face me, you monster!" She emerged slowly, too slowly, making me wait deliberately. She rose from the water calm and unafraid of my anger, water sliding off her scales in perfect streams. She looked almost fully human now. The blue was fading from her skin, replaced with color, my color, stolen from me piece by piece. She looked warm, alive, beautiful even. And I understood. She was building herself into something new, using the parts of me, becoming human while making me into what she used to be. I didn't wait for her to ask for anything. I demanded to know what was happening to my mother, why her skin was turning hard like armor, why she no longer recognized me. The creature tilted her head and looked at me with that inhuman calm, like someone explaining something very simple to a very stupid child. "I am saving her," she said softly, each word carefully chosen. "Your world is too cold for those of your kind, too harsh, too cruel. I am giving her a body that can endure it, one that needs neither firewood nor bread nor the warmth of summer, one that will never feel pain or hunger or loss again." She smiled, and for the first time it looked almost human. "Didn't you want her to live forever, Leo? Isn't that what you've been begging for? Well, this is forever. This is what survival looks like in a world of ice." I stood paralyzed, my mind racing. Live forever, but not as a human, as something else, as something that would sink beneath the ice and swim in darkness and never see sunlight again. Forever alone in the deep. I stepped back, shaking my head violently. "This isn't the deal," I screamed. "I wanted her cured, not turned into whatever you are." Her face turned hard, like old ice that's been frozen and thawed 1,000 times, harder than stone. The water around her began to darken, shadows moving beneath the surface, things with too many teeth, things that hadn't seen light in centuries. "You cannot choose now," she said, and her voice had weight to it, had gravity. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a sentence being pronounced. "The change is already halfway done. Her body is balanced on a knife's edge between human and my kind. If you stop giving her the medicine now, her body will tear itself apart before nightfall. She will die screaming as her organs try to become two different things at once." She paused, letting that sink in. "She needs the final change to survive, to complete the transformation. Either she becomes one of mine, or she is dust and agony." She held out a fish to me, larger and brighter than any of the ones before, glowing so intensely I had to squint to look at it. This was the last one, the final piece, the point of no return. "Give her this," the creature said, "and she will be complete. She will be perfect. She will never suffer again. She will be mine, and she will be eternal." "And if I don't?" My voice cracked. "Then you will watch her die in ways you cannot imagine. The human body is not meant to be half transformed. It will destroy itself trying to finish what I started." I snatched the fish with disgust, feeling it burn my already frozen skin, and I turned to run from there. I was trapped, cornered completely. There was no good choice, only death or transformation. But as I took the first step toward the shore, my new hearing, the enhanced senses she had given me in exchange for my warmth, my memories, my humanity, caught a sound that did not belong to the wind. It was subtle, careful, the scrape of a boot trying to step softly behind a ridge of snow, the rustle of heavy cloth being pulled tight to avoid noise. Someone had followed me from the village. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen everything. I froze on the spot, the fish pressed against my chest, my mind racing through possibilities. The sound came from the gray rocks that marked the start of the trail back to the village, a perfect hiding spot with a clear view of the lake. I didn't turn suddenly. I knew that if I ran, if I showed fear, I would be hunted down like a rabbit in an open field. I pressed the fish harder against my chest, trying to hide its glow under my coat, and I waited. Counted to 3 in my head. Prepared myself. Ivan stepped out from behind the mound of snow, but he wasn't alone this time. 2 of his men appeared at his sides, emerging from other hiding spots I hadn't noticed, closing the circle like wolves surrounding prey, cutting off my path to the cabin. They moved carefully, quietly, like we do when we surround wounded animals we don't want to spook too early. Ivan wasn't looking at me with the disgust from our last encounter at the warehouse. That was gone, replaced with something far more dangerous. His eyes were wide, bulging slightly, fixed not on me, but on the black water behind me where the creature's ripples had not yet disappeared. He'd seen her rise from the depths, seen her hand me the glowing fish. He'd seen everything. "So that's your trick," he said, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. He advanced slowly over the ice, each step deliberate and careful. His voice carried a mix of cold calculation and pure greed. "You've been fatting up for weeks while the rest of us ration boot leather and tree bark, while children starve in their beds, while men try to hunt in the deep forest. And all this time," he gestured wildly at the hole, at the lake, at me, "all this time you had a gold mine hidden in this frozen hole." He looked at me now, really looked at me, and I saw him calculating, saw him making the connection between the glowing fish and his own survival, his power, his wealth. Ivan gave a quick, sharp nod. Before I could react, the largest of his men, a brute named Gregor, with arms like tree trunks, grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back with brutal efficiency. The pain should have been excruciating. My shoulder screamed at the angle, ligaments straining, bones grinding. But I barely felt it, just pressure, just force. He forced me to my knees on the ice, leaning all his weight on me so I couldn't move, his knee pressing into my spine like an iron bar. The other one, a skinny guy with a frost-covered beard and nervous eyes, stepped slowly toward the hole, holding an old fishing gaff with both hands like it was a spear. He glanced back at Ivan, uncertain. "Go on," Ivan urged, his voice greedy. "See what else is down there. See if there's more gold swimming around." Ivan stayed by my side, arms crossed over his chest, waiting to see the prize, waiting to claim what he thought was his. The skinny guy reached the edge of the hole and knelt carefully, gingerly, as if the ice might break beneath him. He peered into the black water, stretching his neck as far as he could without getting too close, squinting through the darkness. I stopped breathing. The wind stopped for a second. The silence became absolute on the frozen lake, so quiet I could hear the blood pumping through the skinny guy's veins, hear his elevated heartbeat. He looked, squinting, waiting for his eyes to adjust to the darkness below. Nothing moved. The water was perfectly still, black as ink, reflecting nothing. He turned towards us, his shoulders relaxing, a look of profound disappointment crossing his face. "Boss," he called out, his voice carrying a note of complaint, "there's nothing here. It's just a dirty hole, just empty water." He let his guard down completely, turned his body away from the water, let the gaff tip drop. Fatal mistake. He didn't even get a chance to stand up. Just behind his neck, so close he should have felt the movement in the air, a blue hand shot out of the water like a striking snake.
It moved faster than anything that size should move, a blur of motion, clawed fingers spread wide. Those long, sharp fingers closed violently around his beard, getting a grip on flesh and bone beneath the hair. There was no struggle, no fight, no chance to scream. It was a sharp, brutal tug, the sound of something being yanked underwater, the splash of displacement. The man vanished beneath the surface in the blink of an eye, so fast that for a moment we weren't sure we'd really seen it, just there 1 second and gone the next. Only a muffled gurgle was heard from below, a breaking bubble of air escaping lungs that would never draw breath again.
Then silence fell upon us again like a heavy blanket, absolute and suffocating. The water settled, became perfectly still again, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. Not a ripple, not a trace, as if the skinny man had never existed at all. The one pinning me, Gregor, let out a sharp, high-pitched scream that didn't match his size at all, a sound of pure animal terror. The weight vanished from my back all at once as he threw himself backward, scrambling through the snow on his hands and knees to get away from the water, his eyes wild with fear. "No, no, no, no," he was muttering, crawling backward like a panicked crab. "Demons, demons in the water! God save us! Demons!" Ivan stepped back 2 paces, his confident demeanor cracking. His face had gone white as fresh snow, all the blood draining from it. He clutched the club against his chest like a talisman, like it could protect him from what lived in the depths. He was no longer looking at me, no longer thinking about wealth or power or control. His eyes were glued to that circle of black water that had swallowed his man, without leaving a single drop of blood on the surface. The water was still again, perfectly calm, as if it had never been disturbed, as if nothing lived down there at all. But we all knew better now. We had all seen. I didn't wait to see if she would come out again, didn't wait to see if Ivan would recover his nerve. I grabbed the fish from where I'd dropped it and bolted toward the shore, my broken ribs clicking and grinding with every step. No one yelled at me to stop. No one tried to grab me. The fear of what lived beneath that ice outweighed their greed, their hunger, their need for power. I reached the solid snow and didn't stop running until I saw my cabin door, clutching the fish against my body, as if it were my own life pulsing in my hands. My only thought, get to my mother, give her the fish, complete the transformation, or watch her die. Those were my only options now. I reached the cabin with my heart hammering in my throat, lungs burning despite the cold, and the sight that greeted me confirmed my worst fears. The door was wide open, hanging crooked on its leather hinges, moving slightly in the wind. I never left the door open. Never. In winter, an open door means death. There was no one inside. The cabin was empty, violated. On the floor next to the empty cot, heavy boot prints had trampled through, clear as a signature in the fresh snow that had blown in through the open door. The prints were fresh, less than an hour old, still sharp-edged, not yet rounded by wind. They were dragging something heavy toward the village, dragging someone. I didn't scream, didn't waste time crying or cursing or asking the empty air for answers. I knew exactly where they'd taken her. I followed the trail directly, running through the village streets with the golden fish still clutched against my chest, not caring who saw me, not caring about anything except getting to her. The trail led to the only place where Ivan felt truly safe, the old stone salt-curing warehouse on the edge of town. The same one I'd been caught stealing from, the same one where he'd broken my ribs. I didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. I hit the door with my shoulder. The wood splintered around the lock, but held. I hit it again, putting all my inhuman strength behind it. This time it flew open, the lock tearing free from rotten wood. I entered without knocking, without calling out. The blast of heat hit my face the moment I crossed the threshold. Actual physical heat that would have felt wonderful once, but now just felt wrong against my frozen skin. They had stoked the wood stove to maximum output. The metal was glowing dull red. The air inside shimmered with waves of heat. And in the center of that heat, tied to a heavy wooden chair and positioned dangerously close to the red-hot stove, was my mother. She looked terrible, worse than I'd ever seen her. Her head was hanging forward, chin to chest. Her skin had gone gray and dry, cracking in the excessive heat like sun-baked mud. The scales on her legs were visible below her torn dress. They were drying out, curling at the edges, falling off in brittle chunks. Steam rose from her body where the transformation was trying to continue but couldn't. Not in this heat, not in this dry air. She was caught between states, unable to complete the change, unable to go back. She was dying, slowly, painfully. Ivan was standing next to her, one meaty hand resting possessively on her shoulder, the other stroking the handle of a long knife, the kind used for gutting large animals. His last man, Gregor, the big one, was blocking the exit behind me. His face was still pale from what he'd seen at the lake, but he held his position, loyal or terrified or both. "I told you you were smart, Leo," Ivan said, and his smile was back, that twisted, confident smirk of a man who thinks he holds all the power. "I knew you'd come running back. A boy always comes for his mother." He squeezed her shoulder and she let out a weak moan, the first sound I'd heard from her in hours. "Let her go," I said, taking a step forward into the sweltering room. The heat pressed against me like a physical weight. "She has nothing to do with this. This is between you and me." Ivan lagged his finger back and forth, like I was a child who'd given the wrong answer. "No, no, no. See, I've thought about this very carefully during my walk back from that cursed lake." He paused, his eyes glittering with cruel intelligence. "I don't want your glowing fish, boy. 1 fish, 2 fish, that's nothing. That's temporary." He leaned down close to my mother's face, studying her scales with fascination. "I've seen what's in that lake. I've seen what it can do. That creature, that thing, is worth more than all the food in all the warehouses in all the villages combined. Whoever controls it controls survival itself." He straightened up and pointed the knife at me. "You're the only one that thing doesn't tear apart. It came when you called. It gave you what you wanted. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to that frozen hole. You're going to bring that creature here, alive, contained, so I can chain it up, so I can make it produce those fish for me whenever I want." His smile widened. "And if you come back alone, or if you try any tricks, I'll push your old woman face first against this stove and hold her there until her skin melts off her skull. Do you understand me, boy?" I looked at my mother, really looked at her. She was barely breathing. Her chest rose and fell in tiny, insufficient movements. If I fought here, if I tried to take Ivan by force, she would die before I could even reach her. The heat was killing her as surely as the cold would have. She needed water. She needed the final transformation. She needed the last fish. But if I gave it to her here in front of Ivan, he'd know exactly how valuable it was. He'd take it. He'd keep her as a hostage forever, forcing me to bring him fish after fish after fish. I had to think, had to be smart. "She can't walk on land," I lied, forcing my voice to tremble just enough to seem defeated, broken. "The creature, she'll suffocate out of the water. She's like a fish herself. If you want me to bring her alive so you can keep her, I need water. I need the big tank, the one on the sled." I pointed toward the back of the warehouse where I knew he kept his brine supplies. Ivan exchanged a long look with Gregor, calculating, weighing the possibility that I was lying against the possibility of losing his prize. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Gregor, go with him. Get the barrel tank. Make sure he doesn't try to run." He turned back to me, the knife now pressed lightly against my mother's cheek, dimpling the gray skin. And boy, that tank better come back full of something valuable, because if you're lying to me, if you come back just with water, I'll start cutting pieces off her, starting with her fingers, one by one, until you tell me the truth. We went out to the frozen backyard behind the warehouse. The temperature drop from inside to outside was extreme enough to make even my frozen lungs ache. Gregor hitched two old, bony horses to the cargo sled, ancient beasts that should have been dead years ago, but somehow kept working out of pure stubborn will to survive. The enormous wooden barrel we used for brine was lashed to the sled, big enough to hold a full-grown person with room for spare. The animals blew great clouds of steam from their nostrils, their eyes rolling white, restless and uneasy. They could smell something wrong on me, that predator scent, that deep water cold. But Gregor's whip set them in motion, and we began the journey back to the lake. The trip was tense. Only the creaking of wood and the horses' hooves on the hard snow could be heard. Neither of us spoke. Gregor kept the harpoon pointed at my back the entire time, never wavering, never relaxing his grip. Upon reaching the hole in the ice, the man reined in the beasts hard, their hooves slipping on the ice as they tried to stop their momentum. He forced me to stand on the very edge of the hole with the harpoon's iron tip pressing between my shoulder blades hard enough to dimple my skin. "Call it up," he ordered, his voice shaking slightly. "And no tricks. Ivan said bring it alive, but he didn't say it had to be in one piece. I'll put this through your spine if I have to." I struck the ice with my walking stick, two hard bowls deliberate that echoed across the frozen wasteland. She emerged slowly, taking her time, majestic and terrible in equal measure. The water around her seemed to darken as she rose, shadows gathering like she was pulling the darkness up with her from the depths. The horses immediately began to scream, actual screams, not whinnies, a sound horses make when they smell something that hunts them, something that shouldn't exist. They reared and fought against their harnesses, whites of their eyes showing, foam flying from their mouths. Gregor yanked hard on the reins, his arms straining, barely keeping them under control. "Steady," he shouted at them. "Steady, you stupid beasts." I stepped directly into her line of attack, blocking the harpoon's angle of attack with my own body. I looked the creature in those endless black eyes, eyes that had seen centuries, that had watched countless desperate people come to her frozen lake. I didn't need complex words. She could read me like I was made of glass. She saw my fear, not for myself, but for my mother. She saw the weapon behind me. She saw Gregor's terror and the struggling horses. She understood the full situation in a single glance. And she understood what I needed, what I was asking. This wasn't a betrayal. It was a plea, a desperate gambit. "Get in," I whispered, barely moving my lips, the words almost silent. "They have my mother. I need you to come with me. I need you to get inside the barrel. Please, trust me." For a long moment, she didn't move, just stared at me with those fathomless eyes. Then, with a fluid, graceful movement that seemed to defy physics, she slid out of the water like an eel, her scaled body moving across the ice with unnatural ease. Water streamed off her, freezing instantly into a trail of tiny crystals that marked her path. She crawled to the barrel on the sled, moving on all fours like some terrible hybrid of woman and serpent. The horses went absolutely mad, screaming and kicking, nearly overturning the entire sled. Only Gregor's desperate strength kept them from bolting completely. The creature climbed into the dark barrel with a single smooth motion. The water inside, meant for preserving meat, overflowed, splashing onto the ice where it froze instantly. I could see her shape inside, coiled like a snake, barely fitting in the confined space. I slammed the heavy lid shut before Gregor could get a good look at what we were transporting, before he could see how intelligent those eyes were, how human that face had become. "She's inside," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Gregor smiled, a stupid, greedy, confident smile. The smile of a man who thinks he's caught the biggest fish in the lake and has no idea it's really caught him. "Ivan's going to be pleased," he said, almost to himself. This is going to change everything. He drove the horses back toward the village, constantly fighting their terror. The animals pulled hard, their muscles standing out in sharp relief under their thin skin, their eyes bulging with the desperate need to escape from whatever they were carrying. They knew. Animals always know. We reached the warehouse, and Gregor forced the panicked horses to drag the sled through the wide doors and into the center of the overheated room. The temperature change hit them hard, from bitter cold to suffocating heat in seconds. Steam rose from their sweating flanks. Ivan was exactly where we'd left him, standing over my mother like a vulture over carrion. But now he looked excited, his eyes bright with anticipation and greed. He let out a nervous laugh, the sound echoing off the stone walls, and stepped away from my mother to approach the barrel with the eager steps of a child approaching a birthday present. "Open it," he ordered, the knife still in his hand, but now hanging loosely at his side, forgotten in his excitement. "I want to see my prize. I want to see my fortune." I approached the barrel slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my frozen ribs. I looked at Ivan, fixing his face in my memory, his greed, his cruelty, his confidence. Then I looked at my mother, slumped in the chair, barely conscious. Finally, I placed my hand on the barrel's metal latch, feeling the ice-cold metal against my palm. "You asked for this," I whispered, so quietly that only I could hear it. "You brought this on yourself." I unhooked the latch and threw myself to the floor in one motion, covering my head with my arms, pressing myself flat against the cold stone. The lid didn't just open, it exploded. The barrel wood turned to splinters and shrapnel, pieces flying in all directions like from a bomb blast. The metal bands snapped with sounds like breaking chains. A geyser of water erupted toward the ceiling, 30 feet high, then crashed down in a wave that doused half the room. And from that explosion of wood and water, a blue shadow shot upward with a screech that wasn't animal or human, but something in between, a sound of pure rage that had been building for centuries. The creature was no longer coiled, no longer restrained. She unfurled in the air like some terrible banner, her body stretching, expanding, seeming larger than should have fit in that barrel. The animals went completely insane, kicking backwards so hard they shattered the sled's shafts, breaking free of their harnesses with strength born of pure terror. They bolted for the door, trampling over each other, their screams mixing with the sound of splintering wood. The creature landed on all fours in the center of the room, water streaming from her body, her claws digging furrows into the stone floor like it was soft earth. She turned her head toward Gregor, who was standing frozen near the shattered barrel, his mouth open in a silent scream, the harpoon dangling uselessly from his hands. She didn't use magic, didn't need to. She used her claws, just her claws. She crossed the distance between them in a single leap, so fast she was just a blur, and hit him like a falling boulder. There was a wet, tearing sound of cloth and flesh being ripped apart. His screams lasted less than a second before they were cut short in a gurgle. Her claws tore through his heavy coat, through skin, through muscle, through bone, shredding him like he was made of paper. He fell to the floor in pieces, his blood pooling fast and dark on the stone, steaming in the hot air. Ivan stood paralyzed, his knife trembling in the air, his face white as bone, all his confidence evaporated in an instant. The creature turned toward him, slowly this time, deliberately. Blood dripped from her claws, making a soft pattering sound on the stone. Nothing human remained in her face now, only teeth and fury and ancient hunger. Ivan's legs finally worked. He tried to run for the door, dropping the knife, abandoning everything, just trying to survive. But she was so much faster. She lunged at him, covering the distance in a heartbeat, and slammed him against the stone wall with brutal violence. The impact made the entire building shake. Dust fell from the ceiling beams.
Her claws pierced through his coat, through his shirt, through his skin and ribs, punching through his chest like it was wet leather. Ivan's eyes went wide with shock and pain. He tried to speak, blood bubbling from his lips. She leaned in close to his face, her black eyes inches from his, and I swear she smiled. Then, with a sharp, violent motion, she tossed him aside like a broken doll. He hit the far wall and slid down, leaving a red smear on the stones, and didn't move again. Outside, the horses, panicked galloping, faded into the distance, their hoofbeats growing quieter and quieter until silence returned. Inside the warehouse, the only sounds were the crackling of the overheated stove and the soft dripping of blood. The creature, her scales stained dark red, slowly turned toward me. I stayed on the floor, not moving, barely breathing. Her eyes softened. The rage drained from them like water from a cracked cup, replaced with something gentler, something almost grateful. She approached where I was lying, her movements fluid again, controlled. From her hand, which was still dripping with Ivan's blood, she gently dropped a fish on my lap. But this one wasn't golden. This one was red, deep crimson, the color of arterial blood. It glowed with a different kind of light, warmer, more alive. "For completing the circle," she said softly, "for bringing me here, for freeing me from that frozen prison for even a moment. This is the final gift." I didn't ask what it would do. I didn't care about the cost anymore. I crawled across the blood-slicked floor to the chair where my mother was still tied, my broken ribs grinding with each movement. I cut the ropes with Ivan's dropped knife, my hands shaking, the blade slipping twice before I got through the hick hemp. She fell into my arms like a sack of kindling, her body so light she felt hollow, burning with fever despite the scales, her skin so hard it felt like touching sun-baked clay. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something I couldn't see. "Come back," I whispered, holding her against my chest. "Please, Mother, come back to me." I placed the red fish directly on her chest, right over her heart, pressing it against her sternum. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fish began to glow brighter. It wasn't burning, it was like watching a sunrise, a warm, pulsating light that seemed to come from inside the fish, from somewhere deeper than flesh. The light pierced through the fabric of her dress as if it weren't there, sank into her flesh like water into sand. Her body arched suddenly, violently, taking a gigantic gasp of air, the first real breath she'd taken in hours. The blue scales on her legs dried instantly, turning gray and brittle. They began to fall in chunks, tinkling on the stone floor or turning to mere dust and ash before they even finished falling. The transformation reversed, running backward like water flowing uphill. Beneath the falling scales, her skin became pink again, soft and warm and human. The cracks sealed, the gray faded to healthy color. The fever broke in an instant. Sweat beaded on her forehead and ran down her temples, but it was normal sweat, human sweat, not the cold condensation from before. She opened her eyes, and they were her eyes, clear, bright, human. Brown eyes, not black, pupils that contracted in the light, eyes that recognized me. She looked at me, really looked at me, and stroked my face with a trembling hand. "Leo, my boy, my good boy, what happened? Where are we?" "Shh," I whispered, tears I didn't know I could still produce running down my frozen cheeks. "It's over. You're safe. You're going to be okay." Exhausted by the change, by being pulled back from the edge of becoming something else, she fell into a deep sleep in my lap. But it was normal sleep, human sleep. Her chest rose and fell in steady, healthy rhythm. Her skin was warm, her pulse was strong. She was back, fully human, fully mine again.
I looked up from her sleeping face. The creature was standing at the open warehouse door, silhouetted against the blue-white snow outside. The blood had already dried on her scales, flaking off in dark crusts. There was no longer fury in her posture, no hunger, just a calm, peaceful waiting. She looked back at me one last time, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Satisfaction, freedom, perhaps even joy. "You gave me something rare, Leo," she said quietly. "You gave me rage. You gave me warmth. You gave me humanity, piece by piece, memory by memory, and now I am almost complete." She touched her chest, over her heart, where my heat had gone, where my memories lived inside her now. "I will remember you. I will remember this. And when the ice finally melts, when the world warms again, I will walk among your kind, wearing everything I learned from you." She smiled, a fully human smile now, warm and genuine. "But you," she looked at me with something like pity, "you carry the cold now. You will never be warm again. But you will never freeze either. You are between worlds now, like I once was." I knew she was right. I could feel it in my bones. The cold had taken root. I would never feel summer again, never feel the warmth of fire or another person's touch without the barrier of ice between us. But my mother was alive, human, saved. The price was worth it. "Every night," I promised in a low voice, my frozen breath visible in the air, "if you ever need me, I'll return to the lake, every night." "No," she said gently, shaking her head. "Our deal is done. The circle is complete. I have what I need. You have what you need. We are even, you and I." She paused at the threshold, one foot in the warehouse, one in the snow. "Goodbye, Leo. Thank you for the gift of revenge. I had forgotten how sweet it tastes." And with that, she stepped out into the darkness, moving toward the lake, her form fading into the snow and shadows like she'd never existed at all. I stayed there on the blood-stained floor, hugging my mother beside the dying warmth of the over-stoked stove, knowing that although winter still raged outside, the immediate fear was gone. The danger had passed. The transformation was reversed. She would live. And I would live too, in my own way. Cold and changed, and never quite human again. But alive. Both of us. Alive. Spring came eventually, though I barely noticed it. While others celebrated the thaw, felt warmth return to their bones, I remained frozen inside. My mother recovered fully. She remembered nothing of her transformation, nothing of the scales or the fever dreams or the warehouse. Her mind had been merciful, blocking it all out. She only knew that I had saved her, that I had done something brave and terrible to pull her back from death's door. She never asked for details. I never offered them. The village eventually found Ivan and Gregor's bodies. They assumed wolves had gotten into the warehouse, though the claw marks didn't quite match any known animal. No one suspected me. How could they? I was just the poor boy with the dying mother, the one Ivan had caught stealing, the victim, not the monster. I returned to the lake one final time, weeks after it was over. The hole had frozen solid. The water was still. No sign that anything had ever lived beneath that ice. I knelt there for an hour, waiting, hoping for some sign, but she never came. Our bargain was complete, our business concluded. I left the walking stick there as a marker, thrust into the ice like a grave marker, and walked away. My mother lived for many more years after that. She remarried eventually, a kind man from a neighboring village who didn't ask about our past. I never told her the full truth, never explained what I'd traded away to save her life. But sometimes, late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I would hear her crying softly,
and I wondered if maybe, deep down in some corner of her mind, she remembered more than she admitted. As for me, I left the village when I was old enough, couldn't stay, couldn't bear to see the lake every day, to feel its pull. I traveled south, always south, chasing warmth I could never feel. And on cold nights, when the wind howls and the temperature drops, I sometimes hear her voice carried on the breeze, ancient, patient, eternal, thanking me, remembering me, calling me back to the ice. But I never return. Our deal is done. The circle is complete. And that, I think, is the closest thing to freedom either of us will ever know.
Before we close, we owe you an apology. We know this video took longer than expected to bring to you, and we're truly grateful for your patience. To all our subscribers who've been waiting, thank you for sticking with us. Your support means everything, and we didn't want to rush this story. We wanted to make sure it was worth the wait. This video has been a different kind of bet than what you were used to, and we sincerely hope that you enjoyed it. We are already deep into the production of new epic stories, but we want to hear from you. If you are longing for the second part of any pending story, ask for it in the comments and it will be heard. Thank you for following us on this journey, and a very special shout out to our members and super chats.